Okay. Hi, everyone. We're going to get started, and the rest of the attendees can trickle in. My name is Jake Kolonowski, and I'm the coordinator for CALM, um, or the Collaborative Action for Lake Michigan Coastal Resilience. Welcome to the second week of the CALM Flooding Lunch and Learn series. Each week, we're having a presentation and time for attendees to ask questions of our presenters at the end. This week, our topic is MMSD's Menomonee River Flood Management Projects, and I'm excited to hand things over to our presenter, Mark Mittag, Senior Project Manager for Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, to tell you more. Mark?
Right. Good morning, everybody. Mark Mittag here with MMSD. I'm a civil engineer, certified floodplain manager, and together with my MMSD colleagues who've already presented and will present in coming weeks, thanks for allowing us to share some of our projects and stories and experiences, and I hope that you find them relevant and helpful for the work that you do. Gonna just turn off my camera here and we'll just focus on the presentation. Um, and I've been working with MMSD for 8 years now and focused on flood management projects almost exclusively along the Menomonee River in the levee system. So that's the story we'll share with you today. So today I'm going to talk about some of the historical flooding along the Menomonee River, the flood management system that MMSD's worked with our partners, City of Wauwatosa, City of Milwaukee, and Milwaukee County Parks in particular, to help implement to reduce flood risk. Talk about some of the benefits of these flood management projects, not only to reducing flood risk, but also upon the community with the green space and additional collaborative park opportunities, and touch base a little bit on the public engagement sort of process or tools that we've used in this future presentation. One of my colleagues, Kate Morgan, and one of our outreach partners is going to talk a little bit more about MMSD public engagement in outreach. The background of this slide here is from 1997 flooding, and I just want to point out, whoops, hold on a second, I'm trying to get the laser. Let me just grab the laser pointer. Tosa gas in the background here. Remember that this is at 68th Street in the Menomonee River. In the background over here is State Street, and we'll see how this area changes over the years. Again, Hart Park neighborhood is in Wauwatosa, has a long history of flooding. Left-hand photo, these photos here are from 1997, and I'd like you to sort of recall them in some future slides and look at other flooding photos. But in the left side here, this is a neighborhood, 72nd and Chestnut. It's in what's currently Hart Park. Lower upper right-hand corner is Sears Warehouse along State Street at approximately 60th Street. And lower right here is a stadium in Hart Park. Sec here. And this picture also is from 1997, and the 1997 flood combined with another significant flood in 1998. Really, these back-to-back flood events were the impetus or catalyst for the City of Wauwatosa and MMSD to collaborate together to reduce flood risk in the neighborhood. To reduce flood risk along the Menomonee River, an alternative was selected that includes upstream flood storage in Milwaukee County grounds, property purchases, and levee construction. Construction of the Hart Park area levee was started in 2005, was completed in 2007, and then other levee segments have been constructed over the years. Currently, the last gap in the levee system is what we call the Western Milwaukee Phase 2B project, and that is under construction currently, although we do have some additional levee improvements and maintenance planned in the future. Besides Hart Park, further downstream along the Menomonee River is the Valley Park neighborhood, and this neighborhood also has a history of flooding. What I'll just point out is way in the background here, you can see the road ends. Of course, that's at the river. Here in this picture, the river's spilled out into the neighborhood. The building on the right here is the Valley Inn, great place to go and have public meetings and enjoy something to eat and drink. prefer to go there, not by canoe though. This is an overview of MSD's flood management system, and it's I'll just sort of walk through what these different features are. Further upstream, we have Milwaukee County Grounds Flood Storage Facility. Shared a few flooding photos in the Hart Park area that integrates right into from Wauwatosa to Milwaukee. So we have the Hart Park and Western Milwaukee levee system, and then a separate downstream system is the Valley Park levee that is fully completed and it's been accredited by FEMA since 2006. To date, MSD has spent over $300 million to reduce flood risk along the Menomonee River. There's much more budget in the future, including $52 million over the next 6 years to finish up the levee system and make some required improvements. A bunch of the additional funding beyond that $52 million is to further up in the watershed to reduce, take out concrete line channels, legacy infrastructure like that, and some additional upstream flood risk reduction projects. So I'm going to just sort of walk through from upstream to downstream this different infrastructure and the benefits it provides to reducing flood risk, as well as ancillary benefits of nature recreation that we collaborate with partners on. This is a graphic of the Milwaukee County Grounds Flood Storage Basin. I'll just explain what it is. This is Underwood Creek. Underwood Creek flows into the Menomonee River and then downstream into Wauwatosa and then Hart Park area. There's a large, next slide will show you a photo of this. It's a large inlet and a 17-foot diameter tunnel that carries flood flows from Underwood Creek to these two large basin lobes here that can store 315 million gallons. So during flood flows, peak flows are taken off of Underwood Creek, stored in these basins and released slowly down so that they reduce flood risk downstream. People often ask, how did the system perform in the August 2025 flood? So I've got some slides on that as well here. This is a picture then of that Underwood Creek, a large inlet that connects a 17-foot diameter tunnel carrying floodwaters from Underwood Creek in the background here to the basin here on the right. And so this system worked well in the floods. The basin ended up being about half filled, 160 million gallons of storage. Some people ask why it wasn't entirely filled, and that's simply because of the way the storms hit the Milwaukee County area, the southwestern part of the county, what drains to Underwood Creek. And the rains were simply not as intense in that part of the county as elsewhere. But overall, this part of the system performed as expected. As we move further downstream along the Menomonee River, we come to the MMSD levee system. So just briefly, what does a levee do? Levee holds back floodwaters. It can be built of earthen embankment here on the left. This is at River Parkway and approximately 63rd Street in Wauwatosa. Also have reinforced concrete portions or flood walls. This is along Hart Park Lane in Hart Park. And this photo here is a reinforced concrete flood wall that transitions to an earthen levee. And this is right in the area of that Tosa gas photo from years ago. Just another illustration of what a levee does. Top part of this graphic here, and this is sort of a graphic from a depiction of the Valley Park neighborhood. Levee system holds back water from the river to reduce flood risk in the neighborhood, such that if that was not in place, water would be flowing into the neighborhood. We looked at what the flood depth would be at approximately this intersection, and it's on the range of approximately 5 feet without the levee system for the levee design flood. Just briefly here, how the levee system works together for the Hart Park and Western Milwaukee levee system. We have here in blue is reinforced concrete flood walls. The red is earthen levee embankment. This is the Hart Park area in the sort of Hart Park East, transitioning into City of Milwaukee here at this dark line. This is the Western Milwaukee Phase 2B levee flood wall project area that's currently under construction. The levee system ends here at Highway 175. So over the years, it's helpful to see how these projects have transformed the neighborhood and reduced the risk of flooding through. On the graphic here on the left, this is 1990 aerial photo, and then on the right, 2024 aerial photo. You can see that through these property purchases of the neighborhood, expanded the park from 20 to 50 acres, created Hart Park East, which I'll have a separate graphic on in a slide or two. But a couple of things I just want to point out is that here's the stadium. You've seen some flooded photos of that before. I mentioned the 72nd Chestnut, that was right here, this flooded neighborhood from 1997. And then Hart Park East is sort of from this street eastward, which we'll look at more closely in a moment. So some of the levy benefits. There's over 130 properties that have reduced flood risk from these projects. Just illustrated here, there's approximately 54 properties. Or let me just say first that this yellow line is sort of levee and flood wall boundary. So on this side, these properties in blue are at reduced flood risk because of the levee. These are properties here that are hatched within the levee area that were purchased. There are some remnant or some properties that remain in place that with collaboration with the city of Wauwatosa, they've chosen to keep them in place for recreational purposes. So the purchase of high flood risk properties helps to enable the levee project, but also green space and new municipal park opportunities. Just on the top here, you can see along the river, these sort of old legacy industrial buildings and storage facilities from 2004, and then by 2018, portion of the levee system has been built. And this is the phase 2B project area that's currently under construction. Wauwatosa then has, within the city of Wauwatosa, has future plans to make this, enable this, or create additional recreational opportunities in this area. During last August flood, just want to just briefly mention some things that happened, how it performed. Overall, system performed as expected. There was some minor levee overtopping in an area where we do have some planned improvements. And it did show some areas where where we have planned improvements and the reason for that. This picture here is in Hart Park. It's right next to that Tosa gas location. It's an area that's designed to flood. This is 68th Street Bridge and again, where that Tosa gas picture was taken from. And of course, you see here the stadium flooded. And this, again, is an area that's planned to flood with the levee design. One item I just want to point out, again, is this neighborhood. This is a 72nd and Chestnut photo or area from the earlier flood photo. This is just from last year. And the picture's taken from this vantage point pointing southward here. And I share this photo just simply because it illustrates to me the benefits of converting this neighborhood to a park area, adding the levee system, reducing the flood risk on this neighborhood. And just a quote from the former mayor in Wauwatosa. I'm just going to read what she said. It seems like that if MSD hadn't been preparing, building, and implementing projects over the last 30 years, it would have been much worse. In a world where Hart Park was still a neighborhood, the amount of catastrophic damage would have been disastrous. So I think that just wanted to share that sort of success story. A couple other photos here. I'm going to keep going with just recognizing time we're on. But again, these are areas where we have some levee overtopping, modestly, didn't really damage the levee, and we have planned improvement there. And then in State Street on the right here, there's a project planned with Wauwatosa to reduce flood risk from the neighboring Schoonmaker Creek watershed. Did mention the Western Milwaukee Phase 2B levee and flood wall project. This is under construction. This is a picture of that work underway last fall. That work is continuing, and we expect that to be largely completed by the end of this year. I also want to share a little more on the Valley Park project. This graphic here, again in yellow, shows the levee flood wall alignment. On the right here in the purple are approximately 130 properties that are reduced flood risk because of levee, and several properties had to be purchased. I think there's about 17 along the levee area and in the park or near the park. What's the park now? That doubled the park size from 1.5 to 3 acres. The Valley Park levee system performed as expected, performed well. This graphic here shows a debris line that was kind of up to the edge of the flood wall here in along levee, along the Valley Park levee alignment. Flood came up to approximately the base of the wall. Residents reported on the landside levee that there was no significant ponding problems of stormwater observed in the streets. We have some additional study sort of checking the standards since the Valley Park levee was completed 25 years ago. We have a sort of checkup, if you will, on the standards and levee system planned for later this year. Plus, I love sharing this photo. Just briefly on public engagement approaches and tools that we've used on many of these projects. Just want to touch base on them briefly. We strive to collaborate on these projects with our municipal partners, Wauwatosa and Milwaukee in the case of these levee systems, as well as county parks. Some of the tools that we've used include postcards to the neighborhoods affected by our construction projects. Where we can, we do ask for input, surveys, asking people's opinions on certain items that we have flexibility in terms of choices of what we would implement. And it's great to meet in person through open houses or listening sessions to explain what's planned and why we're doing that. One item that I especially appreciate, our outreach team, Kate Morgan's done this for me numerous times. She'll be speaking with you in a couple weeks. Is prior to construction, especially going to door and just making sure that businesses and affected homeowners in close proximity to our construction projects are aware of what's going on, so that we can raise awareness and do some collaboration, how that affects property owners during construction. And of course, we have a web page where we post presentation recordings, slides, and things of that nature as a resource easily available to people. We also find that sharing information of why we're doing that, why we're doing what we're doing is helpful. This is a graphic from a sort of levee standards graphic that we've used, explaining why we've had to remove some trees that are near the levee to meet FEMA standards. And one tool I always like to lean on and really promote to our neighbors near our projects is our web page and a way to sign up for email updates. And so we encourage, and as a resource, to ask a question anytime. Each of our project web pages have a way to sign up for email updates or to leave a question or comment about the project. And we strive to get back to people within a short number of days when they do have questions or comments about our projects. I know I've benefited from the questions people have asked on some of our projects. People have good questions, and we want to having answers to them is of course important and helpful. This is just an example I wanted to share of one of the resources that we use. So I did want to, let's see, we're at exactly 20 minutes here. So do want to leave some opportunity for you to ask questions and be happy to try to answer them.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Great presentation. Yeah, so we do have some time for questions now. Feel free to raise your hand and then you can come off mute or type your question in the chat. It looks like we already have a couple of questions in the chat, so I will just start with those. From Aaron, we have, thanks for the presentation, Mark. I remember these floods in 97 and 98, and it's been fascinating to witness all the work in this area over the years. I may have missed this, but what was the design flood system for the Hart Park levee system? Did you happen to know the probability of those floods in the 90s?
A good question. I'm just going to back up to one of our graphics here. Let me find one that might be helpful. This is just something I'll illustrate an answer to this question with. But yeah, 97, 98, I don't recall the exact recurrence interval on those floods. I have looked at how, um, so I don't have a specific answer on that, but I can speak to what the levee design standards are. So FEMA's standards and expectations for levee construction are that, and I like this graphic because it illustrates that purpose, is that is a 100-year recurrence interval or 1% probability flood in any given year, finding that flood elevation, and then your levee, top of your earthen embankment or reinforced concrete flood wall. It's approximately 3 feet of what's called freeboard on top of that. So we made this graphic here just to illustrate, here's the sort of design flood elevation and the top of the levee or top of the flood wall is approximately 3 feet higher than that. That's FEMA's freeboard standard for uh, levee design. There are a few exceptions where there's some additional height near bridges or other sort of structures that cross the river, but that's the general gist of it. So for the Hart Park and Western Milwaukee levee system, we've strived to meet that FEMA standard. We have identified a few locations where we do have to increase the freeboard, the height that is of the levee crest. We're working to make those improvements. And let's see other items in your question. So, and yeah, those are FEMA standards. We strive to meet FEMA standards with these flood risk reduction projects. Property acquisition, sure. I see that other question here. I'm just going to flip back, see if we can find, sorry, let me find a good graphic here for property acquisitions. And for these so a couple of these graphics here show properties that were purchased over the years to implement these projects. And MMSD for the Hart Park properties illustrated by this graphic here worked with the city of Wauwatosa. They led the effort on all the property acquisition. This neighborhood was flooded repeatedly in 97, 98. This was, of course, way before I was working for MMSD. But from what I understand, talking with others, is that generally people were supportive of a different use of their property after repeated flood damage. So we strive to work with partners. In this case, the city of Wauwatosa took the lead on the property acquisition. MMSD helped to fund that. I think there was also some FEMA funding for flood risk reduction and mitigation. So we strive, we do have authority to, if needed, to obtain property through means allowed by the law. But what I'll say is, we strive as much as possible to, collaborate and do a normal real estate acquisition process.
Thanks, Mark.
Other questions?
Yeah, any other questions? I have a question for you, Mark.
Yeah.
So when you were designing these projects along the Menomonee River, I know you have a few different like strategies for mitigating the chance of flood, but do you look to any other communities or programs as examples for your flood management projects, or how do you decide like what specifically is needed in one neighborhood? It's a big question,
Yeah,
sorry.
good question. I'll just go back over to Valley Park here. I guess it starts number one with understanding what the floodplain is and what structures are at risk of flooding. I like showing this graphic here because it shows uh, what part of the community would be flooded without the levee system being in place. So our typical process is, understanding what the risk is, number one, for flood risk. And then number two, we look at a variety of alternatives to reduce that flood risk. And again, these projects really were before my time here, but I can share what I know, for example, from Valley Park neighborhood, because I've talked with people over the years who've worked on this. So, for example, Valley Park had at least several alternatives that were considered. One was buying out the entire community, um, and entirely eliminate the risk of flooding for all those properties and much more green space. I know that the local alderman at the time sat on MSD's commission, and he really championed for the neighborhood. And was reticent that gee, we had to buy 18 properties to build the levee in this area, but was very supportive of that over purchasing and buying out the entire neighborhood. So I think to try to answer your questions, we do look at a variety of alternatives. We do, in this case, I know we looked at least buyouts of the neighborhood, levy construction with property buyouts required to purchase or to build the levy system. And then looking at the park, which you can't really see very well in this graphic, but the park was expanded, essentially doubled in size here, and we worked with Milwaukee County Parks, which is the park owner, to as part of the project to implement park type features as a result of impacts to the park caused by the project. So those are the types of efforts we look to collaborate with entities on and get input from these either neighbors or project partners for how the project would turn out in the end. Other questions?
Thanks, Mark. I am not seeing any other questions. Yeah, I want to say it's great that when you implement these projects, you're able to like double or add park space to the area as well. Like you're not just mitigating the flood risk. There's like other co-benefits of the projects that you're doing. So that's great to see.
Yeah, and I'll just say that MMSD with our sort of uh, we're not a recreation agency, but we work with others who do recreation. So the city of Wauwatosa was able to transform that property required for the levee and reduce flood risk into additional benefits for their community. And then as we work, many of the Milwaukee County parks are adjacent to rivers and creeks in Milwaukee County. So invariably, they're affected by flood management projects. And so where impacts to those parks do occur, or we want to mitigate those impacts, and that can be a mutual benefit.
That's great. So we are right up at time. Thanks, Mark, for your presentation, and thanks to everybody who was able to join today. If there are more questions that come up, please reach out to me via email, and I can try to get the answer for you. And join us next week to hear about MMSD's Green Seams program. I will put the links to the next webinars in the chat. And everybody have a good rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Jake.
Thanks.
Have a great day, everybody.